but first, before we get into that, there's some interesting security stories that we actually ran into last week. And although, we're not technically in the security space, there's stuff that was in there that was interesting enough and broadly applicable to the CIO office. I think we would agree. And the first story we saw was from Chainalysis, uh, looking at the ransomware world and finding actually some good news for a change that last year was actually a good year for ransom payments in that ransom payments are down 35%, under $1 billion that have been tracked, that got sent out. So we're getting better at figuring out this whole cybersecurity thing as far as ransomware goes. And it seems like both we're a bit better organized on our side and the black hat side is struggling a little bit. All good news there.
It is. I am a little bit shocked. Maybe shocked's not the right word, but I never expected the whole ransomware thing to be a thing for as long as it has been. I'm not a security guy, as we talked about, but I've often felt, and I know some of the attacks were very sophisticated, but most of the ransomware attacks on, at least on enterprise organizations, were mostly due to the lack of sophistication in the case of the enterprises. They just were fairly sloppy, and they didn't have good solid backups, and they weren't doing them routinely enough, and all those sort of things that were relatively easily preventable. I mean, there are definitely examples of the ransomware attackers getting smarter and better and making it very hard where they could lock down, including the backups. But that wasn't the case. I remember, my dad, if you haven't caught it from me talking about him in the past, he was a 30-year LA County sheriff, and he spent most of that time as an investigator, a homicide investigator, and a bunch of, and he used to tell me, it's like you see these television shows, and you always have these criminal masterminds, and of course they exist, but they're stories on TV because they are the fun, interesting stories. Most criminals are very simple, brute force. They go for the low-hanging fruit, as we would say in the tech world, right? The easy victims. And it's been the same with this, right? For the most part, if you were a victim of ransomware, it's because you left a hole and you gave an opening, right? They're not going to go after, for the most part, someone that was really diligently protecting themselves. And so, that's why I've long viewed it, but it has stuck around for a long time. And I think it's, what we're seeing here, and this is a big number, right? A 35% drop is a big number. And I think it's reflective of a few things, right? It's part of this, the sophistication. Organizations are getting their act together. There's higher levels of enforcement, or the law enforcement entities are finally taking it much more seriously, thanks to some very high profile attacks. And I think, the net of that is, if you do have your act together, it's much easier to just thumb your nose at these guys and go, we're not going to pay it. And that's what we're seeing a lot of this. So overall good news, but also, a cause for continued diligence, because they're not going to go away quietly into the night. So security will always be a major issue.
Yeah,
So I don't know if you had any other thing to say about it.
not really. Like I think it's great that we have this visibility. I think the stories of the past couple of years have definitely made people think more about their firewall and storage and backup strategies, even at the mid-market level, because they realize that there were people that will come after you just trying to get 100K or 200K just to go away and give you back your stuff. People now realize that they're targets. I also am a little concerned. I think from a geopolitical standpoint, like this stuff is so hard to tell, but obviously with a war like a Russia-Ukraine war, that's going to make it harder for Russia as a nation state to pursue something like ransomware at the enterprise level. So I wonder to what extent those pieces fit together. Way above my pay grade for sure, but I hope that this is a good trend and not simply a sign that some of our nation state ransomware attackers are simply a bit distracted at the moment.
Yeah, that is an interesting perspective. I think it is possible that there's some of that at play. I do think, I don't think this is a calm before the storm. I don't think this is like, oh, this is clearly going to get worse. But I do think there's an important and I guess this was what I meant by being diligent, is that
Mhm.
this isn't an issue that's going away, and I would argue that the enterprise attack surface grows every single day, right? Our distributed
Mhm.
environments, the use of microservices, our focus on cloud, introducing AI now, are all additional points of vulnerability.